You better be in the house when them street lights come on. Ain't that what your mama used to tell you? But I bet you when she told you to stay out the streets, she had no idea that the YouTube streets would take over the world. Uncle Juice, public figure Boogie, Baby Down So Raw, Detroit Gossip, and the most dangerous voice in Detroit, Dawgface TV.
Bitch, I talk more shit than Dawgface.
They running shit from coast to coast. Welcome to the Danger Zone.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's go.
Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. My name is Dawgface Calderon. This is Real Life Unfiltered. This is a special episode. I always say that the episodes are special because they are, but this one, it is true to form. This episode is truly and indeed a special episode because of my guest. Not to say that all my guests aren't special, but this particular guest. So this gentleman, he is if you are from the city of Detroit, and he operates beyond the confines, the constraints of the perimeter of the city of Detroit, but if you are from the city of Detroit or Michigan, you are familiar with the name Perkins Law Group. When you hear the name, so if you are in trouble somewhere, or if you are on the opposite side of this gentleman, and you walk into a courtroom and you see him, or you hear that he's going to be on the opposite side of you, you instantly, automatically get nervous because you know your ass is grass if you don't come correct. Mr. the Honorable Todd Perkins is in the building. How you doing, brother?
Thank you for that introduction. I'm doing well, man. How you doing today?
That was good, wasn't it?
Oh man, you know something? You've honed your craft.
I try to do my best. I try to do my best. Attorney extraordinaire. Is it Esquire? Do attorneys still use the Esquire at the end of their name, or not so much?
Oftentimes, like if I'm writing a letter,
okay,
I'll put Todd Russell Perkins, comma ESQ period, but
right.
not in in speaking or talking, but in a written document. Oftentimes, but in a pleading, like in a law pleading, like you file with the courts, you don't put your Esquire. What you do is you put your bar number or your license number, or temporary license number if you're operating out of state. So you get a temporary number when you're not licensed in Chicago or Iowa. You get a temporary number.
Yeah, like a temp tag, like a car.
Yeah, exactly. You're really borrowing someone else's license to operate in those.
Operate. Yeah, I got you. Mr. Todd Perkins is in the building. Long before, and this is a personal conversation. This is not an interview. This is a personal conversation between this gentleman and I, because I hired him. And we're not going to get into why I hired him, but I hired him to represent me with a particular situation. And we're not going to get into that now, but it's personal because I've had the opportunity to work with him. A lot of times when attorneys and people who work in the profession of law at the level and height that Mr. Perkins operates in, a lot of times it is an impersonal experience, and people are talking to these type of people based on what they read or what they heard or a story they heard somebody else tell. In this particular situation, this is more than personal for me. Even though I'm not going to get into my case at all, it's more than personal to me, and I have up close and personal information and knowledge, right? Because I've hired this gentleman to represent me, and he did a fantastic job. That's all I'm gonna say. Mr. Perkins, you hail from the wonderful city of Detroit.
Yes, I'm from the north end of Detroit.
You say that proudly. So,
man. I still live on the north end.
Right, before we get into this, so I'm glad you said that, right? Because I moved to Detroit in 1986, right? Okay. And so Detroit is east side, west side primarily. You have Southwest, you have Highland Park and Hamtramck, which are surrounded by the city of Detroit, right? And then you have the north. You have Southwest Detroit, which is its own little world, and then you have a small enclave called the North End, which is an extension of what Black Bottom used to be. And we're going to get into that conversation as well. But I have a direct question for you. Because most of the people who I know who live on the North End, and let me just, so from I-75 to Woodward.
Right.
So that is the east and western boundaries of the North End, right?
From the Boulevard to Highland Park.
Right, the Boulevard to Highland Park. So listen, I've had a lot of conversations with people who are from the North End. And I'm like, man, y'all East Siders, a lot of, so, and I'm gonna tell you my story first, right? So I'm like, man, so the North End is it officially the East Side in Europe?
Technically it is. Because it's east of Woodward. It's east of Woodward. So technically we are. But we don't, we don't claim anything other than the North End.
Right.
And
go ahead. Right.
But here's also what I look at is the North End is, I believe, other than Black Bottom, which you brought up, which, was a mechanism of society that got rid of Black enclaves in cities all over the country. What happened in Black Bottom happened in a lot of other urban environments. But the North End is the last remaining Black enclave, and it's historically the oldest place where Black people could live. Because we couldn't go west, we couldn't go east, but we were confined there, and it really started to change a lot after the riots.
Yeah, 67.
67 riots. And I wasn't born then because I was born in 70. Mm-hmm. But where I grew up at used to be a multitude of different people: Polish, Italian, Black. And my mom and my grandparents, because I live in the house that my great-grandfather owned. So they would come home from work, and the next door neighbor that moved out. The next day, across the street, they didn't moved out. And then what happened was it allowed other Black families to move in those homes that they left. And but they'd also left a void in the city of Detroit, which, city of Detroit it's been hard to recover from.
Right, exactly. And the reason why I brought that up about the East Side, West Side thing is because the North End is situated in such a way to where they're blocked off from the rest of the East Side by the freeway. And that's a mighty, mighty freeway. It's not like it's just a couple of streets that separates. It's I-75 blocks. It partitions the North End off from the rest of the East Side, right?
Right.
And then when you go travel southward, you're going into Midtown and then downtown, which right. So, and then I know that. So, my daughters, both of my daughters went to what is now DSA, which was the old Northern High School.
Okay.
Right? Turned into DSA.
My dad graduated from there.
Was an all-girl school academy, right?
Yeah.
So, coming up when I moved to the city of Detroit, I was traversing east and west. Most of the guys who I know from the North End. When you get kicked out of Northern, when you were in high school, when you get kicked out of a public school, right? Most of the people from the North End, they don't go east. They travel west towards the 12th Streets, the Woodrow Wilsons, and the Linwoods and all that, right? So growing up on the North End, did you feel more connected to the West Side because of the proximity to it, or was it like an overreaching thing where, hey, we are North End, but we are East Siders?
Let me give you, I had a unique thing with the North End, but also let me tell you about the West Side that buttresses the North End. If you think about it, what do we have west of the North End is we have those beautiful homes in the Boston Edison district that really were a buffer from us to the West Side. You understand? All along from Highland Park down all the way down to the Boulevard, basically, you have a different style of homes along that way that are kind of like a buffer from the true West Side. So I don't think you really get truly west until you cross over the Lodge Freeway.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? By the time you get to 12th Street, now you're really West Side. You know what I'm saying? So,
you're in trouble.
But my unique circumstance was I grew up on the North End, but I was earlier in my life. We lived in the West Side from like when I was born until I was about 4 or 5 years old, when my parents lost the money that they had, right? So we moved to my grandparents' house on the North End. We moved back to the West Side for a minute, then we moved back again permanently. And what happened was I had footing in the West Side. So I went to elementary school in Hampton. which is Palmer Park Academy today. It was Hampton Elementary. So I was going to school with cats that lived on right at 7 Mile in Livernois, whether Sherwood Forest, whether University, or other side of Livernois. So those are the guys I knew from elementary school. When I went to 7th grade, I went to U of D High School. So my parents my parents didn't have money, but they found a way, whether my mama hit the lottery, you know what I'm saying? My dad cut a couple of extra heads.
Right.
You know, I got 5 brothers, and we all went to Catholic school after 6th or 7th grade. And so I went to U of D High School. So I'm traveling on the bus because we didn't have a car. I'm traveling like an hour, hour and a half to get to school every morning. I play sports. And so I'm getting home 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I didn't have the experience of the school life on the North End. I didn't go to Spain. I didn't go to Sherrard. I didn't go to, to the schools. When I was a kid, though, I was the last kid at Maybe Elementary, which is a school that was behind my house that's now a baseball field. And I was the last kindergarten class. I was the last first grade class at Dwyer, where DT is right off of Kniff. But I didn't have that. I had a different experience. So educationally, and when you're in school, you're socializing. I had friends from all different parts. From U of D, you got kids that grew up in the city. You got the white folks that live in Bloomfield, they live in Grosse Pointe. You got wealthy people, you got middle class, and you got people like myself who are below middle class. So you have that influence and those experiences that's unique. So socially, my personal life, I'm playing basketball around the court at Bradby. You know what I'm saying? But when I have sports, I'm playing at U of D, which is a Catholic school. So I'm not even playing in the public school system. So I had my unique background was that I had more than most, because I had more than the kids at U of D, because the kids at U of D didn't have the experience of being in the North End. And the kids from the North End didn't have the experience of being at U of D. It's just like jokes. We go to the court around the corner from the house. We joke with cats. We be like, man, you ain't never been to Northland. And, they get mad because they hadn't. The only thing they used to go to is the downtown of Hamtramck, because downtown Hamtramck used to have a bustling downtown when we were kids. They had federals. They had all kinds of stuff. So, my experience was vast, but it took a lot to do it because didn't have a car. So we was using the bus or getting a ride and, and all those other things. So, I was alienated by some cats from U of D because I didn't have nothing or, didn't have material. I had a lot because I got mama and daddy and brothers. I had a lot. I just didn't see it how much I had until I got older and realized how the wealth that I had internally. So I had my experience was vast and unique. So I don't see too many people with that type of experience other than my brothers, because they went to Shrine and my other brother went to U of D. So, it was different for us.
Gotcha. So let's talk about just law. And when you talk about your experience in your upbringing, how many lawyers did you know outside of going to the U of D, right? How many lawyers from your neighborhoods, right, did you see?
None.
So
None. I didn't know any lawyers.
Normally, as a child, as a kid, as a young adult, we typically want to be, or we strive to be, or we hope to be what we see, right? What was it that sparked in your mind? What happened? How did the idea of becoming a lawyer, how did that enter into your mind?
Well, let me say this. As far as a lawyer, my younger brother, he's a judge. He's the popular judge where people don't have pants on in his courtroom.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
bro.
that's my younger brother.
Get the pants on? Okay, I got you.
Right, that's my younger brother. So
Okay,
he's 2 years younger than me. When we were kids, he's always wanted to be a lawyer. Myself, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a stockbroker. Law was somewhere in there. And, it wasn't until I got to be in college and maybe as I graduated and I started getting, you get a closeness with your father. I mean, my father was always in a home and, my mom and dad were married for 42 years. But you get a closeness that's beyond the father-son relationship and more of a mentor friend relationship. And my dad, he used to talk about, so my dad had a unique experience. He's from the North End. He was born on King, and his dad was a barber, and he owned a restaurant, and he was a dynamic dude. My dad actually taught my grandfather how to read, and he became a very influential Republican. And remember, see, what people got to understand, back then in the 30s and the 40s, Republicans, Lincoln freed the slaves. So, and the Democrats were the Dixiecrats that created Jim Crow. So tables is turned today. We all talk about this, want to be a Democrat. You understand, that's a fluid idea. Things can change. And right now, we don't know where we're at. But again, so my grandfather wanted my dad to be a lawyer. That's all he wanted, was my dad to be a lawyer. And my dad was set to go and matriculate at 16 years old. My dad was absolutely brilliant. He was a concert level violinist. And this is in the 40s, you know? And my grandfather got killed on Oakland Avenue by another barber. You know, it was a fight, and my grandfather, I think, pulled out a knife, and the guy shot him. And it changed because my grandmother, who was a lot younger than my grandfather, had 2 businesses, and she told my father, help me run these businesses and I'll buy you a car. He says, my dad used to say, she bought me that car and I ain't been worth shit since. You know what I'm saying? Because it was too much at 16, 17 years old to have a car of his own. And he was running these businesses. He wound up leaving Northwestern because he was at Northwestern High School. He dropped out. And ultimately, about a year and a half later, he then came and finished and graduated from Northern, but he never went to University of Chicago, and it changed the trajectory of his life. And then he started working for the county, cut hair for a long time, and my dad did some dynamic things, but he never lived out that vision. And so as I'm growing older, my dad is talking about the things that he wished that he had, because I have older brothers who have been successful doing other things. My older brother's in insurance, and now he works for the stock exchange. And I got another brother who's in music, older brother, and then I got another brother who's an artist. But my dad said, you know, I really want one of y'all to be a lawyer. And you know something, my dad was my hero. Absolutely. Second to God. You know what I'm saying? After my dad, here, I'll tell you how bad it was. After my pops passed, you know, I go by the house. My mom, you know how your mama cut you deep, right? She said, you don't even come around here since your daddy died. I was like, Ma, come on, man.
Right.
So, but you want to be what your dad, if your dad is your hero, you know, that's why it's so important what we're missing sometimes, what men don't realize what they're missing in these kids. They can define what these kids can be, because I wasn't thinking about no law. I was, you know, halfway in the streets and, you know, somewhere over here and all this other stuff, going to school all the time. Always had a job. But, you know, the streets are sexy. You know that. I mean, that's what's got these kids caught up today, because, you know, it's a lively environment. And so I said, look, I'm gonna go to law school. And he said, my dad was like, you're gonna go to law school? You're not gonna go do this up, you know, do some other things. I was, you know, teaching French. I used to speak French. I went to school over in France. You know, my parents with nothing sent me all over the world. I went to Ivy League college, man. So how could he not be my hero? You know, to see the things he did with no material and make these things happen and make my dreams happen. If I could just give back. So, but along the journey, and I've seen, you know, being from the neighborhood, right? You've seen how a good lawyer and a bad lawyer can affect people's lives. And I saw it as a kid. I saw it, and I saw, hey, I could be in that realm of those people. And so I went to law school, and I got out, passed the bar first time, and you know, I opened up my shop. Never got a job working anywhere. I just, you know, my dad was like, you know too many people. I know too many people for you to work for somebody else. He says, that's not what we do in our family. And so I wound up getting some space and some mentorship from a guy named Marlon Evans. Man, that dude right there, man, he was something else. A hell of a lawyer, a great individual, and a man who really passed away far too soon, you know, but he gave me space in his office. I rented space from him. You know, it's funny how I couldn't rent space from other lawyers, even if I was making a little money. He was the only one that gave me that opportunity. And I tell you, who made it happen? Was his wife. You might know his wife is Vonda Evans. His wife made it happen. She told him, she's like, this boy is gonna be something. She said this. I knew Marlon before I graduated, but he didn't know I was in law school. He just knew I hung with some dudes that, blew a few goods and shot pool all the time with him. You know what I'm saying? And I ain't telling on him. I'm not telling you what he did, but I'm gonna just talk about what I did. You're right. I met him at a pool hall, and used to always drive a nice car. I didn't know what he did. It didn't matter to me, because we just had a good time at this pool hall that was around the corner from where Tiger Stadium is. Right. And I was over at the prosecutor's office after I got my bar. I knew some lawyers who were friends of my older brother, and I ran into her. She had just won her judicial race. And I interacted with her, and she said, I'm going to tell my husband about you. I said, who's your husband? I didn't know who they were, one and the same. Right. And she told him, she's like, when you get a new office, you let him get a space in your space. Gotcha. And it happened. And from that, it went from there. And then eventually, I always envisioned not just being a lawyer, but creating a firm, creating a team. Because, you don't have too many Black firms that offer a full service to their clients, whether it be a lawsuit, whether it be divorce, and it can't happen through one person, right? Because you're going to be a master of what you do, or you're going to be a jack of all trades. You get a master, and you allow other people, these young minds, to master what they do, and you give them the tutelage, and you give them the training, and you allow them to get the education in other areas, to go to seminars, and let them master what they do. And let them be the best in the areas that they do, and you become known, and you want to become known as the best. It doesn't mean everything works out all the time, but you continue, even what you learn more from your losses than from your victories.
Yes, you do.
So that's how it happened. And my dad, let me say one more thing. I can't say enough about him.
Yes.
He was cutting hair, and I had been practicing about 2 years, and I'm making a little money. I wasn't, first year I did some court-appointed work. But, court-appointed lawyers, they have a bad stigma about them. There's a lot of good court-appointed lawyers, but the stigma attached to them is if you have a court-appointed lawyer, you're not getting the effective service. And that's not true. Now, you got to look at the individual lawyer and see. But for me to be doing work where people are knocking on my mama's door because, I'm in the hood, my mama would be like, page him, because back then you had pagers. And my dad said, I'm gonna stop cutting hair and I'm gonna come work in your office. I said, Dad, I'm not making enough money. He said, you don't worry about, he says, I'm 60-some years old, I'm almost 70 years old. He says, if I can't put asses in them seats, then I don't know what my life is worth. So he said, I'll cut on Friday and Saturday, which is when he made most of his money. He says, but Monday through Thursday, I'm gonna come in your office. And he would answer them phones, he would talk to them clients. Man, sometimes clients would come in and hire me. We'd be sitting at our little conference table. And he sent me down to the store to go get some water and pop for the people. And I come back up, the money be on the table. Then people be basically patting me on the head. I'm like, I'm the lawyer. You know what I'm saying? They be like, my dad be like, you go ahead, you go to court with them people. But what he was training me for was how to interact with people. And at that time, he told me, he says, the practice of law is the management of the expectations of your client. That's all it's about. And the only way you can manage expectations of the client is if you create a relationship with them.
Relationships are key. And listen, when you are an entrepreneur, right? There's nothing more, because you're solely and totally reliant on what you can make happen with your own mind and with your own hands. Right. As an entrepreneur, you don't have the luxury of getting a check every week or every 2 weeks. You don't have that company. As an entrepreneur, you are a hunter. You eat what you kill.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, you spoke very highly of your father. We live in a situation, and we live in a time where the demise of the traditional Black family, where you have a father, mother, and you have children being raised by both. Right. We are 2 generations removed from seeing.
No, more than that.
Yeah, maybe. Let me see. 60s? Yeah. Is it the 60s?
I think it started happening in the 60s. Like when we were kids. I'm a couple years older than you, but think about it. When in the 70s, you started seeing teenage pregnancy. It wasn't
Yes.
it wasn't such a thing in the 40s and 50s, based upon what I hear from my parents.
Right,
and
right.
You started to see that, and what you started to see is, so if you got a teenage parent, guess what? You got the grandparent who's being the parent to that kid, and if that starts the cycle, what happens is that great grandparent ultimately becomes the parent to the great grandchild, but they're too tired at that point. They can't pour in the same amount of energy at that point. And so, then those kids who had kids, they never learned how to be a parent.
Right.
So the cycle continues. And so we're lost. But I blame, something. We have to be accountable for ourselves too, right?
Yes.
But I do blame society in this much. And see, they don't talk about this a lot. Mainstream society don't want to talk about the negatives, and they want to talk about slavery. I don't even have to go back that far.
Right.
When you used to get aid in the home, guess what you couldn't have? You couldn't have a man in the home.
Yes.
You couldn't have a man in the home. Shame on them son of the bitches, man. I mean, that's crazy. So you're creating a divide in order for this woman to get money. You're creating a divide. That to me is, you don't have, that's an element of Jim Crow that is, that's the silent
Systemic.
killers.
Yes, it's systemic. And the crazy, well, it's not crazy, but so you can teach a class on the things, on the systemic tools that were used and put in place to help usher in what we refer to as the deterioration of the Black family unit, right? And it's crazy because we grew up, it was called ADC. I'm kind of old. It's called ADC, aid for
Right.
family and children, right? And so you only could receive that aid if you were in a situation where there was no man present. So instead of a system that supported the growth and unity of a family unit, they supported and they rewarded women who had children with giving them assistance and then telling them, because I grew up on ADC, and my mama, after they got divorced, my mama, her boyfriend, he couldn't. If the worker was the workers used to do home checks back then. If the there could be no sign. Not only, it wasn't just seeing a man when they came to do their home checks. There could be no sign. They were looking for signs that a man.
Hold on, it's like a search warrant.
Yes.
It's like a search warrant in your house, man. I'm like, they come in, if you refuse them to come in, they'll refuse you aid.
Yes.
So would they be like, these underwear look like grown man underwear, you know what I'm saying? And what's this right here? Here's the thing. What's the justification today, in today's time? If we could go back and ask the government and the policymakers, what's the justification for doing this? They don't have a reasonable answer. They're not going to have a reasonable answer.
You're right. There is no reasonable answer. There could be no reasonable answer, even in hindsight, right? As a child, I used to wonder, like, what is that? I couldn't formulate the full length thought process, but I'm like, so it didn't take me long. When the first book that I read that opened up my mind, I think it was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I think I read Carter G. Wilson's Miseducation second, right? Those two books helped even though I ended up getting in trouble and doing my thing, those books stood with me. And the education that I got and the knowledge that I got from those two books, it helped. I'm here now because even though when I was younger, I chose the wrong side of the law of the equation, somebody still had put something in me, and it sparked a level of curiosity that guided me even in my darkest times, in my darkest hours. There can be no reasonable explanation other than the conspiracy that we all believe it to be, right? There is reasonable explanation.
It's a real life thing.
Yes. Let's talk about education for a second, because you grew up at a time, and I grew up in a time where it wasn't just traditional education as we see it or as we see it now. That you had vocations, you had vocational trades, right? And I've always been a believer. I understand the difference between. So I was a student of of W.E.B. Du Bois and George Washington Carver. So I understood the difference between the philosophies, where you had one who was more involved with teaching and training Black people in the areas that could allow them to maintain and upkeep their environment with the trades, plumbing, electrical, masonry, just building trades in general, right? When they took those things out of the public school system, I think it had more of a negative impact on the urban environment, because what were the chances of somebody graduating from a high school going to college to begin with? A trade was a form of education that allowed a person to take care of themselves and to provide services to the communities they lived in.
Right.
What do you think? How did we get to the point to where we are now, as far as curriculum and as far as school settings go, particularly in the city of Detroit? It's a national problem, but in Detroit, how did we get here?
Yeah, well, let's talk about our home. Our home base. So when I was a kid, I talk a lot about my father, but my mom played a great role in it, because she used to always say they would do anything to get us an education, because they said no matter what happens to you, you're a perfect example. That book that you just talked about, and those books that you talked about that you read before you had your troubles, they can never take an education, and they can never take your mind away from you. Now, you can lose your mind because of illness and mental health, but so my mom said, look, we're going to get you the best education we can get you, because they can never take that away from you. They can take away your cars, they can take away your houses, they can take away your family, but they can't take away your education. And with an education, you can always start to figure things out. And, she used to always say that, when I'm talking about when we were kids, she used to say, they're trying to take public education away from regular society. And, and you look up today, and, they're still trying. They're still at it. They're still trying. And so what they're doing now, it's just, I'll give you an example. So let's talk about charter schools, right? So they created charter schools, and really charter schools have, the effect of them. I'm not talking about them and saying they're bad or anything like that, but what is the effect? The effect of it is that Detroit Public Schools has lost the power that it had in educating the kids. And then what happens if a kid goes to a charter school, and that charter school gets the money from the state for that kid, and the kid decides to leave to go to DPS? DPS has to accept them, and they haven't gotten the money. Right. So it's a tearing from within. And I'm not here to say, we're not here talking about whether we should have charter schools or DPS, but I'm saying, when I was a kid, I tell you, I'm going to give you an example how great DPS was when I was in sixth grade. So for Detroit's purposes, and really on a national level, people recognize what kind of quality school U of D is. I went to University of Detroit Jesuit High School and Academy. So I went 7 through 12, all boys school. And oftentimes you see kids who come from public school who have to take like summer programs or some remedial classes. Man, I went from Hampton Elementary in the sixth grade, and I went to U of D, and that first year, I got 3.5. And, I'm competing and outdoing all these other kids. And I'm not even in a situation where I'm catching a bus and, and I'm doing all these things. And I don't have the tutors, and I don't have all the exposure to those things. Right. But I'm competing. But I give credit to my parents, but I give credit to DPS. DPS was one of the best school systems in the country. People forget the city of Detroit at one point in time in the 50s and sometime in the 50s was the wealthiest city in the world. Yes. It was the wealthiest city in the world. And so all of those things had benefits, and that was the school system. And it's, my belief is once it became more looking like us, that they started pulling out the resources that, and, I just believe that. I'm not necessarily saying that, and we could pick that apart and show how that has happened right. Based upon the change in the demographic in the city of Detroit. It just, right. It's happened. And, why it happened, when it happened, and all those other things are the topic of other discussions. But so education. So it has deteriorated. There's no question about it. But it also, I think, like we talked about earlier. You're talking about this conversation that we're having sort of in a linear way. So all the things we talked about beforehand really have and culminate right here. You got the deterioration of the Black family. So, when you have a family that's broken, you have kids that come to school broken. So you don't have the same kids that I went to school with in the 70s who had mom and dad, or, maybe there may be some dysfunction around that, but it was still more cohesion in the family unit, the Black family unit, than there is today. Statistically, I know I'm right. Empirically, objectively, I'm right. And what those numbers are, we can go Google them, we can AI them, we can pull them up like that. But at the same time, we know that I'm right. And so now they're requiring teachers to be more than just teachers.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? You got teachers who are extending themselves in different ways. And so that's just one aspect of it, but I think it starts because as a Black family structure, we're not the unit that we were. And that unit, it brought benefits to those kids, that brought benefits to the longevity and the positives and the benefits that come into their growth, their maturity, and their ascendancy into adulthood. They were more complete individuals. And now, we don't have that. So you have that. Then you have the disparity in funding. Look at this. There's a play. It's a one-woman play that I went. We got a house out on the East Coast, and I went out there because I had to go to an event with my wife, and we went to an off-Broadway play. And this woman who does this off-Broadway play, I'll figure out her name if I get a chance. I want to give her name, give her credit. And this is the last series. She's going to stop and wind the show up. She's been doing it about 25 years. And she's talking about all that is she does 90 minutes. That you talk about endurance. And it was fabulous. And it was the first time I've seen a true account of what it's like from a woman's perspective, who's going to see her woman friend who's in prison, but talking about Black life out in the outside world, and the cyclical effect of the prison system and how much it's interacted in our life. But what I'm bringing up is she talks about these prisons. They're in these way off areas, these secluded areas up north. And I didn't, something, I wasn't paying attention to it before until she brought it up in the play. Those prisoners who are in those cities, those people are counted towards the population of those cities in order to get funding from the state, so it allows them
the government. Yes.
Come on, man.
Yes.
And then not only that, the jobs that are focused around the prison facilities, the industry that comes around it, the restaurants, the hotels, all those things are feeding those people in those particular areas. And at the end of the day, a lot of the people that are in those prisons have come from our neighborhoods.
Yes. So listen, let me say this. Let me chime in on that, because this is an experience that I know all too well. So when you talk about the impact of the prison industrial complex, when you talk about how, when you look at the northern lower peninsula of Michigan and the entire upper peninsula of Michigan, because Michigan is comprised of two parts, lower and upper, right? In the northern lower peninsula and all throughout the upper peninsula, right? The number one industry, it used to be iron and ore, right? That went away in the 1980s, right? When they started shipping in iron and ore from China and places elsewhere from overseas, right? So the industry from the northern lower peninsula and the upper peninsula, the mining industry collapsed.
Right.
The northern lower peninsula and the upper peninsula of Michigan was one of the most destitute areas. Yeah. It's kind of like being, if you ever been to the Dakotas or Iowa, when you look at the Indian tribes and the reservations, it reminded you of that, because it had the economy in the northern lower peninsula and all throughout the UP, it was terrible. They were able to stimulate, right, that economy again by situating prisons in those areas, and those prisons became an industry sort of like what you see with GM, Ford, and Chrysler. if it were not to this day, it's 2026, to this day, if it were not for the prisons in operation from East Lake, Michigan to Standish to the Upper Peninsula, from Kinross, Newberry to Marquette to over to Baraga and Ojibwe. If it were not for the prison systems, if it were not for the prisons, there would be no economy to stimulate any form of lifestyle in those areas. Right now, to this day, if you take the prisons out of those areas, there is no industry that would sustain an economic base up there, period.
I know. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, all of that was made by, you know, look at this. I look at, do you ever see The Matrix?
Absolutely.
So The Matrix to me, and I was talking to, you know, I had the Reverend Kwame Kilpatrick here in the office earlier today. He was right here and we were talking. And I said, and we were talking about this same subject. And The Matrix to me, you remember when Neo found out how the Matrix worked and it had these bodies and pods, and the pods were the energy that ran the Matrix. I look at us as Black people as the energy. We're those pods that are running economies, but yet we benefit in no way, shape, or form. And you know, and it is just, to me, that's how I visualize what you talked about with all those different areas where these prisons are, where the economy is. You know, that's not in our neighborhoods. That's not necessarily saying I would like to find a way that we reduce prison populations, we reduce and we find a society that is, one, less violent. There's more opportunity for our young people and for our people to involve themselves in a way and make a way for themselves. And that's not to make excuses, and that's another conversation. You know, people make choices, and I get that, but there's no question about it. Opportunity, it falls in our way less than it does others.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is a perfect segue because I had in my notes, and I have no pages, right? The Honorable Kwame Kilpatrick. Let me tell you a story before I ask you anything about him. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about him. So I'm sitting in a prison cell. I believe I was at St. Louis Correctional Facility, which was a level 4, and St. Louis is in Midland, Michigan. And I believe I was there when the Honorable former Mayor Kilpatrick, when he won. And I remember watching CNN, and on CNN, they had I believe it was a Black Mayor's Convention. I think it was in Philadelphia this year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Okay.
And, all right. And Mr. Kilpatrick was the keynote speaker. And I had heard about Detroit having a young, vibrant, like they called him the hip hop mayor. I had heard about him, right? And of course, everybody knows who his mother is, Mrs. Kilpatrick, and his father being a political insider, right? So if you're from Detroit, if you're from Michigan, period, you grew up hearing about Mrs. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick. She's a legend, right? She's her name, the Honorable. Yeah, she's a legend. Yes. Sort of like, so we have legends. We have political legends operate in the city of Detroit. She is one of them. We've had there's nobody bigger, I think, than the Godfather himself, the Honorable late Coleman Young, right?
Oh man. Oh yeah. Man.
So my question to you is this, right? So I remember watching this. So they had on scene, and we don't get much coverage about Detroit things when you were in MDOC, especially when you when you get to the lower peninsula. Right. Certainly not when you don't get nothing. We get Milwaukee and Wisconsin, all that, right? So the first time outside of seeing him, reading about him in some paper or something, the first time I ever had the opportunity to see him, right, to hear him, was that when he was the keynote speaker for that. It was a Black Mayor's Convention, and it was in Philadelphia. I'll never forget this. And he
was it the 2004? It was Democratic. The 2004 Democratic convention, because he made his mark.
Was
when
it
he
in Philly?
Spoke at that. He set that on fire. That was 2004.
What was that in Philly?
It may have been the mayor's convention, but I know in 2004, I do
Yes.
remember he set the world on fire with that.
He had several major speaking engagements on major
did.
platforms. I remember for a fact it was 2004, right? Okay. So when I saw him, right, with the suit on, with the broad shoulders, right? Listen, so we don't have when you're incarcerated, you don't have much to be proud of because we're hearing stories about the streets and the city and drugs and who shot who and who robbed who and whatever, right? So it's a lot of when you're in prison, there's a lot of there can be positive aspects of it in terms of what you are exposed to, but for the most part, we hear all the most negative things that's going on transpiring in the city of Detroit. Right. Kwame, the honorable, we're just gonna throw out there just the honorable mayor, former mayor, right? When I saw him giving that speech, I was like a proud brother. I was like that. I was like, you go, boy. So like literally
because he was our age too.
Yes,
he's the same age. He and I were both born in 70. He graduated from 88 in Cass. I graduated 88 from U of D. So we didn't really know each other in high school, but along the way, I met him when he was running with his mom and his dad after he graduated. And I used to work for the Democratic Party, so I met him then. And we really weren't connected in any way, but I always respected him. He showed the same respect for me. But when I saw that and him being, a 32, 33-year-old dude giving that kind of speech, man, come on.
Listen. So in my mind, so I'm just watching it. So I don't think he knows this, but there was a major conversation all throughout the MDOC by the Black inmates. No matter what your religious affiliation was, no matter whether you were in a gang or no gang or none of that, right? There was a major, major conversation, particularly amongst people who have connections to Detroit, about how we were proud. I mean, you had the most violent, the most aggressive, the biggest drug dealers that had been caught, nabbed, and put. We were all talking about. Listen, his ascension to power and to fame was a moment of pride for people inside the prison system who were associated or had any love or admiration for the city of Detroit whatsoever. His ascension was a prideful moment.
Oh yeah,
I can remember like it was yesterday. I was in St. Louis. It was 2004. Yeah, my father died in 2005, so it was 2004. His ascension was. It had more of an impact than what I think he knows. When things started to spiral downward for him, it was just as painful to see it or to watch it as it was gleeful to see him ascend to that level, right? Because in my mind, and I'm a student of history, politics, and religion, right? I study a bunch, right? When I saw him giving that keynote, he gave the keynote address. He was a keynote speaker. I said, this brother could be president, bro. Yeah, there's nothing stopping him. Yeah, how articulate he was, and when you look at how confident it was, just well articulate, confident, and when you look at his speech style, his demeanor, I said to myself, well, to be absolute, I likened him to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in terms of his ability to be able to captivate an audience, because that's what he did. He didn't just give a speech, because some people are better orators than others. He didn't just give a speech. He was captivating in that way. And in my mind, I said to myself, man, this brother here, this is before Obama. I said, this brother could be president.
He made you believe. He made you feel good about yourself. You're sitting there in a 6x10 or whatever the numbers,
about that,
and still enjoying what you saw from a guy you didn't know him personally.
No,
but not only that, he made you feel like you knew him personally.
Yes, he did.
You know what I'm saying? So you're in that situation where he had the ability to convey a message, tell a story, and make you feel good no matter where you were.
No matter where you were.
No matter if you're in the Pyrenees Mountains or you're in the gutters of Detroit. you felt good when you heard him. You liked to see him prosperous. You liked to see him shine, and it's like you said it right. You feel as great as you felt and as good as you felt seeing him rise and seeing him ascend into the stratosphere. You felt that same, on a converse level, deficit, that void, and you still see the void.
Detroit has to recover.
People have opinions. Well, that it depends on your perspective.
Right.
So, and we could get to that, but
I'm saying black people in terms of our heroes, because he was a hero.
Exactly. But here's the thing, though. It could be a true hero story because the story is not done yet, because God is still giving him life. And, there are people who have opinions about him. He gave away this, he did that. And you can hold on to those things. But see, I'm a positive individual. I'm always looking for the good in everybody. And, to me, he has a potential Job-like existence, where he's lost everything and now he's rebuilding himself on that road to Damascus. And in that road to Damascus, he's learned, not only he has the hindsight of the mistakes that were made and all of the things that he left in the scuttle that's been left in the road as he moves forward, creating a different bridge to wherever he's headed. And now it seems, he's a minister. He is, he still speaks, the eloquence, the feeling of being able to move people is still there. Yes. And, and again, he's still under attack. He's in the news, he gets a couple of dollars and they want to come after it.
They want it.
So he's still on that road to Damascus.
Got you. And, so go ahead. I'm listening.
But go ahead.
Please continue. So I got you. So, please continue.
So I just believe that his story's not finished. His story and where he's going to go. I pray that he ascends in a different perspective. I don't think his is in politics anymore. But if he's here to move the people, and if he's here to move and get us to coalesce, be more cohesive as a people, I'm all for that. Every day, all day, twice on Sunday.
Right. I'm going to take it a step further. So listen, there is an absence, seemingly an absence of strong black male role models. And we talk about role models. A role model doesn't have to be a perfect person, doesn't have to come from a perfect situation. A role model, especially in the times we're living in now, would probably be more effective if he has gone through trials and tribulations of life so that the young people can understand it and relate to him, right? He's certainly not done. Mayors in the city of Detroit, in your opinion, as humble as it may be, as astute as it may be, who was the most powerful mayor?
Coleman Young.
Let me tell you why I say
Alpha to the Omega.
Yeah, listen, so let me just tell you something, right? So I was born and raised in Pontiac. I didn't move to Detroit until March of '86, right? But Coleman Young was such an imposing figure. And I'm from Oakland County. So, when I was coming up, we heard being from Pontiac, you're from Oakland County. It's like the county seat, right? We knew about the battles between L. Brooks Patterson, who was the county commissioner, I believe. He was the county executive of Oakland County, right? I believe he served as commissioner too, but he was the executive of Oakland County. So the executive of Oakland County and all things Oakland County, and at that point in time, I think Oakland County was the second, third richest county in the country, right? So we grew up hearing about the battles between Coleman Young, the late Honorable Coleman Young, and L. Brooks Patterson, right? We even as far as Pontiac, and I'm from Oakland County, but the people from Pontiac, Flint, Saginaw, the east side of Michigan, even though they're not from Detroit, they were rooting for Detroit because Coleman was like a black superhero. He was like a black superhero. And then we understood busing. I was born in '72. So I was born in the same year that they started busing, kids into, neighborhoods that didn't want to see black kids being bused into them, right?
Right.
So I grew up understanding what race was because I grew up in that,
Right.
experiencing that, right? So Coleman Young was like a superhero, brother. I'm talking about he was something to be admired, and he was something to he was bulletproof. And I knew, and I felt that the people from Oakland County who've always had a tumultuous relationship with Detroit, not just Wayne County, but it was like Detroit versus all of Oakland County is how it looked to me growing up. And it was like L. Brooks Patterson versus Coleman Young.
Right.
And the late great mayor used to be beating the brakes off of L. Brooks Patterson. They couldn't. Right. I'm talking about they sent federal probes. They sent everybody at him, and they couldn't do nothing with him.
But let me say, but the story doesn't start there. One of the things which you have to understand is that man faced down Congress. They called him a communist.
Yes.
Before he became the mayor of Detroit, and he faced down the McCarthy commission and defeated them on their own ground. And you know, because they would ruin people just on the hint of a rumor that you were a communist and all these other things at the time when, you know, we were becoming an isolationist country and we were well deep into the Cold War and all those other things. And he faced that and was victorious. So he showed his black bottle medal in front of Congress long before he came and did it in the city of Detroit. Because, you know, he was a state senator before. And, you know, and he came in there and they didn't expect him to win. And he came in and he won. And, it changed the tables. He was a superhero before he was the superhero that we know as Mayor Coleman Young. He was a superhero before that. He had it. It's almost just like Jordan at North Carolina when he sank the shot. You know what I'm saying? He showed what he was going to be, and he just lived that out professionally the same way. Coleman Young, and obviously I'm changing lanes to make an example, but at the same time, Coleman Young was destined to be what he was at the time, at that right time to trigger that, because you're coming off the heels of the riots, right? You know, you're coming off the heels of, you know, because here's the thing, Mayor Kavanaugh wasn't a bad mayor. Mm-hmm. My mom, my parents, my grandparents, they love Kavanaughs, you know, but at the same time, he was the mayor at the time it happened. So he was out, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, he came in, he got rid of stress, you know, the big four, you know, he changed that. And remember this, I'm going to tell you one thing. Go ahead. Got it. Go ahead.
Time out. So for people who don't know, he just dropped a bomb on the streets. For the people who don't know what stress was a tactical police draconian unit similar to what we call the SS. If you ever watched the Nazi movement, right? And if you ever watched any movie from World War II, the European campaign, stress was a unit in the Detroit Police Department. I think it was primarily consisted of white people, white men, white officers.
Oh yeah. Well, the department was mostly white back then. Yeah,
and talk about beating your ass.
Like my daddy said, they whoop your head till it rope like molasses.
Talk about Listen. If they were to investigate all of the fabricated evidence and trumped up charges that came as a result of stress patrolling and policing large segments of the city of Detroit, those convictions would have to be overturned, right?
Absolutely.
Then you said Big Four. Now, I moved to Detroit in 86. I moved on Van Dyke and Harper first. We was on Badger, Peter Hunt, Noel Presley, Kurt, right? Astro, right? Marion, all the way down. I'm on Van Dyke and Harper, right? I came to the city of Detroit to sell crack and rob. That's why I came down here. I didn't move down here with my mama. I came down here with my godbrother who's the east side, right? I came down here to sell dope because, well, listen, if you're going to sell dope in 86, where's the best? Ain't no better place to sell dope.
Hey, man, you're making me lose character, man. You know,
I came out here to sell crack. Crack was banging in 86. Hair mixed jive, put it in the refrigerator, Bundles? We selling the bundles?
Hey, you know something? I just had the Dawgface experience right now. You know, I lost it when you said that. You know,
yeah, that's why
I'm gonna tell you, I don't care what people say about you. One thing you do is keep it real. I'm telling you right now.
Right.
You know, most people dress up different things and say different things. Then you know, you just kept it real. You kept it real. You kept it a buck, as they say.
Man, I came down here to sell dope, DOPE, and try to rob me something or whatever else I could do. I was a criminal, right? So listen, Big Four. My first encounter with I came down here in March of 1986, I believe it was my mother's birthday is March 21st. I came down here before her birthday. I believe it was the second week. It was between the 10th or the 14th of 1986. And my first encounter with Big Four, I was on Badger. I was on Badger between Van Dyke. I was on Badger right around back then. It was 86. It was so on Peter Hunt. There was a candy store, like a little. It was called Ed's Candy Store, right? Mm-hmm. And I was there, and I didn't know what Big Four was because Pontiac didn't have no Big Four. You know, so we had police. We didn't have no units running around like that. Listen, I got a pocket full of crack. They jumped out, and I'm standing there looking stupid as hell. Everybody else started running. I'm standing there like, what? Because I ain't used to the police being openly combative and dirty and underhanded like this. This is my first experience, and they taught me a lesson, right? So I seen everybody else start running. I ain't what they can't. I ain't thinking they can't. You haven't saw me sell no drugs, so you can't. You don't have the right to shake me down. You don't have the right to come frisk me and none of that. Boy,
but you was trying to apply your constitutional rights in a war zone where there are no rights.
Listen, because when you from Pontiac, unless you're known, they harass you. But if you just making your way back then, now it was different because Oakland County's patrolling up there, right? But back then, I ain't running. I'm running for you. You ain't seen me do nothing. You can't just go in my pockets. Mr. Perkins, I tried to run too late. I tried to run too late. I'm on Badger. I tried to cut through it was at Chubbs. Chubbs just stayed on the corner right there. I tried to cut through Two Family Flat. It don't exist no more. I tried to cut through in the alley to go on to the next street over is Marion. Brother, when I got one step foot in that alley, the police car drove down the alley and hit me. Hit me. I swear to God, hit me. I flew up in the air, came down, boom. It got out. When I tell you, I'm 15 years old, man. They picked me up and threw me in the air and slammed me down to the ground. Now it is unconstitutional. They tried to do George Floyd me. The Big Four tried to George Floyd me because he put his whole boot in my neck. My whole neck was planted. It was like my face was in the ground, like a cartoon. My face was in the ground. He took a cigarette. It's like, you bitch ass nigga. You don't run from us. And he took the cigarette and put it out on my face. Psst. Put it out on my face. That was my introduction to the Big Four.
Did they take you in?
No. They took the money I had. I had crack in my pocket. They took the crack in my pocket, put it in their pocket, took my money, put it in their pocket, and kicked me in the ass and got in their car and left.
And I tell you what, when you're in the streets, you call that a pass.
But listen, let me tell you how stupid I was. I'm feeling like, how dare you? Who do I report this to? This is a travesty. This is a miscarriage of justice. We've heard that before, right? Right? This is a miscarriage of justice. I'm like, what? Bro. So then when we get back, we all the guys in my crew, we get back together. I'm all sore and shit, leg all messed up, right? They're like, man, will you see them coming? You better get the fuck on. I said, it don't matter if you done nothing, bro. If you didn't have anything on you, you had nothing on you. The Big Four will beat your ass if you just an ordinary citizen. If you in their way, if they don't like how you looking at them. And that was my first experience with the Big Four.
Wow.
That's my
so
perspective.
but here's the thing: you go back to Coleman, See, and Detroit had experienced something that was that had never been experienced at that point. When I think from 84, 80, 82, 83, and that era was something, because I lived here. I've been in Detroit all my life, other than going to college and you know, living for brief periods in other cities. That experience, man. I mean, to see it and to see these rock houses come up, and that back then you saw the $30,000 and $40,000 a day houses. I mean, it was a situation. It was an industry that doesn't exist today. No. I mean, drugs are still interwoven into our society. Unfortunately, because people use them, and there's an economy that drives it. But back then, it was a different economy because you didn't have telephone communication devices like you do today. You didn't, these places were houses where people could guarantee they could go get these items that they wanted, and you had them it was a number of those spaces, like on the North End. I mean, you had houses.
North End was
$40,000. And hold on, and because remember, what changed? It also changed is when they changed welfare. It also changed the economy in the streets too. And see, people forget about that. So when Clinton came in there, and right around, Engler, Clinton, and all those people, when they had welfare reform, it changed the economy in the streets. So it became, again, there was a reduction in free money with people.
Yes.
I'll tell you what the return to free money was in our modern day era. It was the COVID relief.
COVID relief. That was likened to what was going on with that amount of money flowing was the same amount of money, if not more, flowing before the Welfare Reform Act came.
Yeah. I think it was more this time around.
Yeah, I always tell people always say, well, Republican, Democrat, I'm not in love with either party or either political affiliation, right? So here's what I was taught this. Black people, we are brand conscious. Once we love something, we love it. We love Cadillac, right? We love Mercedes-Benz. We love the finer things because when you look at our sojourn here in America, we have been kept away from so many things that are considered to be white and bright and white.
But you know what the problem with us is, what people are? Is you use those words. We love this, we love that. And see, I go back to my pops. My pops always told me, never love nothing that don't breathe.
Yeah.
See, when you love something, you put all your heart and sinew into getting it, like getting that Cadillac, getting that Mercedes. And then when you got it, it's the only item that you're gonna buy in this. Well, not only, but you buy it, as soon as you buy it, it's worth 30% less than what you just paid for.
Yes, sir. So watch this, Mr. Perkins. Yeah. So when I when you think about just the conditions that have transformed what the Black community used to look like 3 or 4 generations ago to what we look like right now, there's a variety of different. We always talk about what is, and then so people always challenge us to talk about the solutions to the problem that we're having now, that we're experiencing, that we're living in now, because we're living in the problem now, right? So it's not something so the problems that exist inside the Black community, they don't happen in a vacuum, and they're not compartmentalized. The problems that happen in the Black community, unlike in the 70s, in the 80s, and some parts of the early 90s, sometimes problem areas were problem areas, and as long as you stayed away from them, right, then you were, for the most part, okay. In communities that we live in now, there is no separation between the worst problem and the best possible living situation. It is all it's encompassing. It's all there. There's no separation. Right. You can live on 8 Mile or you can live on Jefferson. You still got the same problem. If you live in Rockville Park, you can live in Indian Village. You can live in the Boston Edison district. When you come out your house to go to the Family Dollar or go to the Chicken Shack or the Coney, you are running the risk of losing something. At best, some personal item, if you're lucky. At worst, your life.
Yeah.
Always ask us and they challenge us, well, what are the solutions? You always talk about what it is. You always talk about the white man this and the white man that and this, that, and the third. But but black people, for the most part, you understanding what took place. Why can't we as a people, because we have the knowledge at our fingertips, right? Our cell phones are more than just for Instagram and FaceTiming, right? With all the knowledge and all the information that we have now, specifically and particularly about why we as a people look like we look today. And then we contrast that with people who are immigrants who come over here and take advantage of us and take advantage of our lack of self-governance, right? Why do you think we are still so disenchanted with becoming the best possible versions of ourselves when we know what we've gone through and we know what our people who look just like us have sacrificed for us to get to where we are now? Why do you think black people as a whole, why do you think the attitude is so dismissive towards being absolutely great and retaking over our communities? Why do you think this is going on?
Well, I talked to a lot of people, the people that I represent. I talked to a lot of people last year on a different level, having run for mayor in the city of Detroit. Yes. And it really gave me an opportunity to hear the wants, the needs, the things that you're talking about right now. But you ask some people, you say, well, why would you do this? Or why, you've got a great mind. We just read this report and you digested it, you analyzed it, you've critically analyzed it. And so you have all of the tools to do this. And one, I think that they don't believe that's attainable for them. They just don't. Nobody's been there to tell them that they can. And nobody's been there to encourage them. And I won't say no one, but not enough. And, and again, I go back to the breakdown of the Black family structure. I think you can't escape that. And we can blame all kinds of people for why what happened to us. And, and then you go, okay, so what now? What are we going to do about this? What, and that's where it takes, what we're talking about. You said everybody who's, I think earlier you said everybody who's a hero is not, or leaders are not necessarily the people that we see on TV or the, elected officials. The leaders are the people that our community is desperately looking for to show young people the way. I'll give you an example. I was doing a career day, and this young guy, he's from my neighborhood, from the North End, and he's a elite educator, and he works in school systems around the state. And he was at this, this is maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I was there along with all these other, he was focused on having Black males for career day at his school. And, I was the last, and I was like, I didn't think it was any reason why I was the last, but, I probably knew him the longest since I knew him, both our nose was snotty. I'm a little older than he is. I'm about 6-7 years older than him. And what he told me was, he says, look, I saved this guy for the last. And this is the impact that we can have in our communities. And the reason why we need to move back into our communities to be those examples to those kids, is, he says, in our neighborhood on the North End, a lot of people would go to college, but nobody ever finished. And he said, this dude's family and his brothers, they went to college and they finished. He says, I went to college. I wanted to be like him. I didn't know this. I'm telling you, it wasn't scripted. It wasn't anything. I'm talking about, I'm getting ready to talk to these kids, and I'm getting emotional about a young guy who I've supported. I continue to support him. I represent him on different ventures and things like that today. I'm talking about, it was deafening. And even as I'm telling the story right now, I'm reliving the moment. And what he's saying, he says, the kids in the neighborhood looked up to he and his brothers because they went to college and they finished. He says, I'm here today. And I told my parents, I want to finish college. I don't want to go to college. And I mean, this guy's got a PhD now. He got way more education than I got. And it was that example that being in the neighborhood, at least for him, and I don't know how many others, and being and showing that it can be done, because most of these kids don't believe it's attainable. They don't believe that, no matter how much skill and intellect they may have, they don't believe, and they don't realize how close they are, how close it is. What's 4 years of struggle? What's 4 years of struggle? Figuring out a way, and I've committed, and my wife and I, we're committed to making sure that some of our friends and our relatives, we get together with other people. We see people. This young girl in our family, she found a way to get a scholarship, and she doesn't have the money, but we got the family together to give them that, because it's only 4 years and it's going to change her life. You know what I'm saying? The real fear is what happens. She's a young lady. What do we have with young ladies and young men? It's starting these families too early. You know what I'm saying? And you start the family too early, and now you're continuing the cycle that might have brought you into this world, or at least has affected our society and our worlds, with people who are parents too soon. So I think that the initial thing is, I don't believe that they think it's attainable. And I don't believe that enough people have told them that you can do it, that you can make it. And, it's just, that's one of the many things that are missing in our community. But I go back to it. I think it starts in our family structure,
right?
Or lack thereof.
Lack thereof is the major point. Let's do a rapid here. I want to incorporate a rapid fire segment into this conversation.
Okay, all right. Let me get seated up.
Right. So you ran for mayor,
right?
Was that something that you had planned? Or was that an opportunity that just fell into your lap? Or was it something that you feel like, did you feel like there was a void in terms of the people who were running? And did you feel like that what you had to offer, what you had to bring to the table could have been helpful to the city of Detroit?
Oh, I absolutely. The last part, I absolutely believe that I had or have the ability and the skill set and the life experience to navigate the challenges the city has. But I stand here now to support our leadership now, or our elected officials now. But what got me there, a lot of people don't know this. And a lot of people during the campaign cycle, I didn't talk about it, because a lot of people don't want to hear about your spirituality or God and things like that. And, with these days that I have, the 70-hour work weeks, the 80-hour work weeks, what I've learned to do at night is meditate and pray. And I was sitting up one night. It was the last Wednesday in June in 2024. I don't even remember the date. It was the last Wednesday, second from the last Wednesday in that month. Whatever day it was the second from the last Wednesday. And I sit in my basement and I turn out the lights and I meditate. And I believe God sent me a vision of me running, of me being on the podium, announcing my campaign. And, and I truly believe that. And in being obedient to God, I was compelled to do that. And what I wanted to do, my wife was out of town. She works for a major corporation and she travels throughout America and India. I mean, she's a superstar. And she was in LA at the time. And immediately when I come out of this fog, I wasn't asleep. I'm telling you, I wasn't asleep.
Mm-hmm.
I called her up and I said, I got to talk to you. I need to talk to you. And she says, everything okay? I said, well, she could hear a seriousness in my voice. And
right.
I said, there's nothing bad, and but I need to talk to you. And it's not something I ever talked about. My younger brother's an elected official. He's a judge, right. And he's always desired that type of
position,
advocacy, to work in the community in an elected official capacity, to be mayor of Detroit, to be a judge in Detroit, and he's a judge right now. So she comes home, she gets home on Saturday, and I said, let's pray first. And we sat down and we prayed. And she says, well, what's the verdict? What's going on? I said, I want to run for mayor. And to my surprise, she said, okay. And then I started thinking, these things started aligning, and I didn't think that God would give me something that would bring conflict to my household, and it didn't. Even though it is, I'm telling you, whoever runs for office, it is a huge sacrifice. And it's not something that I could have done earlier in my life. I never desired to be an elected official, ever. I'm a private sector dude. I'm a guy who loves the community and works in the community on my terms, or the terms that whatever organization that I'm a part of does, not in public office, but in private, quiet ways. Because I do believe in giving in anonymity. I don't need people to know what I gave them, and I don't need to know. When we make donations, we make them blind. That's not important. Other than doing something when I get a huge, significant sum of money that I build something, it'll be in the name of my parents or my wife's parents, but nothing to necessarily for myself. So she said yes. And from that point, the next conversation I had was with my younger brother, because, I got 5 brothers, but my younger brother, the one who's a judge, that's my guy. That is, that's my man. And my wife and his wife, we sat down, we went to La Dolce Vita up there near 6 Mile and Woodward, a great Italian place, had dinner, and we talked about it. And from that point, we started building. And so my decision came far later than most other people, because there were still things I had to do as far as making sure that the law firm was still operating, and making sure that the people who were at the firm were positioned to, because I wasn't going to be able to be as prominent a figure on a everyday basis, because I'm going to be in the streets. I'm going to be talking to seniors. I'm going to be at these things. I was still doing trials. Every trial that I had during the campaign, it was a great victory. And it gave me an opportunity. I was doing trials in 36th District Court more than wanting to do them even in federal court or Wayne County. You know why? Because 36th District Court jurors were Detroiters.
Right.
So I got an opportunity to have an audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was and I tell you, man, it was an experience that, although I never thought about doing it, I'm so glad to have had that experience, because now I know from a perspective of what really people want in the community, what really people need in the community, from seeing it from the people who, truly people who are hungry, people who are just making a decision, who are not hungry, who've been fed, who may make a decision to come back. And that's what I think, remember when we couldn't live outside of any other community, we had to live around each other, where you had doctors living next door to the guy who was a mechanic. You had a lawyer living next door to the guy that worked at the plant. We were a unit. We were a family. I'm talking about a cohesiveness in Black communities that doesn't exist anymore. So I envision a time that we get back to that. But yeah, so that was how it came about. Had never planned on it. I thought in my wildest dreams, I thought I would be supporting my brother to do it, and I was called, and I believe I had to be obedient and serve him.
Would you ever consider running for public office, any form of public office again?
I never desired it before, and I don't necessarily desire it now. But if called, and here's another thing. My kids are, my son will be 21. He's a senior at Howard. My daughter's graduating from high school, and she's going to become a freshman at Howard. So my kids are older. I couldn't do this 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I lost my wife, my kid's mother. And so I was a single parent for, 3.5 years until I got married. My wife today, she adopted my kids. I'm talking about, man, God is something else. So it would have to be something that, my wife and I, because now I'll tell you another thing. I didn't know too much from the perspective, because my kids worked on the campaign, but my daughter was mad at me. She was like, I already don't see my dad a lot because he works here and around the country and does a lot of things. And now he wants to run for mayor. And so she was telling my wife, her stepmom or her mom, because, she's the doctor. And they have a great relationship. She was telling me, and I didn't even know, because, she'd come to the campaign office, work, lick stamps, do all that stuff. She would speak for me, I'm talking about also dynamic. And she was mad. So now, and mad in a sense that she wants more of my time, but now that they're older.
Already divided, right? Already divided time.
Yeah, and so now that they're older, it's a different decision. It would be more of a decision between myself and my wife. And I don't think that she desires that. We like private, life. We like doing philanthropy. We like being able to, like I couldn't last year. I went to our house on the East Coast maybe once or twice, where usually we go once a month, I do work out there on the East Coast sometimes, and that didn't happen. So it is definitely a sacrifice. So the answer to that is I don't know. I don't think so. I don't desire it as I sit here today, getting ready to start another trial.
So I have one question. This is another deep dive question before we go into our rapid fire. So Detroit had a unique experience in terms of jurisprudence when we call that the Detroit Recorder's Court, right?
Oh yeah.
So listen, I think it was the most unique court system out of any metropolitan area in the country where you had a large Black population. Is it true that Detroit's Recorder's Court came about because Black people in the city of Detroit felt like that they couldn't get fair representation or they couldn't get impartial justice from Greater Wayne County? And so therefore the Recorder's Court was born out of Black frustration with law, respectfully.
So I don't know how the genesis or the creation of it. I saw and have been a lawyer and saw its decline.
Right.
And I saw its disintegration. And that to me was, a tactic by the Republican Party. I felt it was racially motivated. I experienced it. I protested on the steps of Frank Murphy against it. And, Detroit Recorder's Court was one of the most successful courts. It had money in its coffers. And what I mean by that, it ran its budget right. It ran its court system right. It was the most efficient court. And really, it was a takeover that allowed Third Circuit or Wayne County to take the money that court had and put into their deficit accounts. And it also changed the balance of power for people in the city of Detroit. So, it doesn't strike me, it wouldn't strike me as odd as to that's the reason why it was created. I'd have to ask my mentors or, do a little research on it. But I saw the decline. I know why it declined. And these are beliefs. My beliefs, I think, are facts, not just, speculation.
Right.
And the effect of it has been, a power suck from people within the city of Detroit. Because what you had and what people don't understand is now you go to Third Circuit and you have a trial and you have a criminal trial, because Frank Murphy or Recorder's Court was a criminal court. And, and it allowed Detroiters for Detroit cases to have Detroit juries hear the facts in their case rather than have the populace of Wayne County hear and make those determinations. So it was more appropriate to consider it a jury of your peers than a jury of your peers for Wayne County citizens being your jurors. So, that is it still pains me to this day that it happened that way. And you know, we're here, and we have to make the best of it and get back to you know doing our own work and policing ourselves and building ourselves. And I think that was a tragedy.
Yeah, I got you. So watch this, Mr. Perkins. It's perfect segue. So oftentimes when you hear, and we're gonna go into the whole Carmelo Anthony
Oh boy.
situation, young brother who was just
Yep.
convicted today for the murder of another teen who he was at a school sports function, right?
Right. Right.
This is so oftentimes you hear black people, we complain about the legal system in this country, especially when we get into a situation where we feel like we are outnumbered, or that we have no chance of being properly represented or properly judged by people who look like, sound like, and understand our own particular experience. Um, if we all black people, I don't care what state you're from, I don't care what your political affiliation is, we all feel some sense of fear when we come in contact with law enforcement, and we
Right.
feel a sense of fear when we come in contact with the legal system, right?
Yeah.
Because both have been used as tools in a within the guise of systemic racism, and they have not been friendly. They have not been fair and equitable to us as a people. That's how we feel.
Why were you using past tense? That's current. That's
Yes, it
ongoing.
is. Yeah, ongoing, right? So, as far as race relations have come in this country, there's the overwhelming majority of black people still feel that from the lower courts to the highest courts in the land, we feel like that when there is a decision that needs to be made about something that involves or concerns us, we feel like that we are fighting an uphill battle. I don't think white Americans necessarily feel like that. What can we do, or what should we do? Is the answer into voting people who feel like us and represent us and our causes? How do we change? How do we get rid of that feeling? What can we do, if anything?
I'm going to tell you some shit that, and I'm going to be like you right now because I'm really kind of pissed off about this. Is we can do something right now when we get those jury summons and we come and bring our black asses down to court. Don't make piss ass excuses to get off a jury service because you want to talk about, well, I think the jury system was wrong to my brother, my cousin, and all those things, and you have the opportunity to make that right then. So oftentimes I see a lot of us who don't want to, it is an inconvenience. Don't get me wrong. There's no way to look at it any other time because, you had other things to do, grocery shopping, to go to work. You got school. You got a lot of different things. It's 3 or 4 days. Now, I've had trials that have gone on for a month, and that's a different kind of commitment that you're asking for jurors than for, a murder trial, a drug trial is 4 or 5 days, 6 days sometimes.
Mhm.
That's what we're asking of you. So don't come in here with these lame ass excuses to get off a jury service so that people, the defense attorney or the prosecutor don't want you, or the judge is going to dismiss you for cause. So come on, let's first answer your jury summons. Second, when you come down here, make a commitment to serve. Now, if you legitimately feel that you can't do this and you wouldn't be a good juror, you couldn't be fair, or or your personal experiences would not make you or qualify you for this type of trial, I don't have no way to prove that. I can only go by how I feel when I'm listening to people feeding me shit. So
Right.
that's one thing. And absolutely with voting, absolutely. We got this thing going on right now where this gerrymandering, now they're redistricting all over the country. So they're going to
Mhm.
take, it showed itself several years ago when they gerrymandered in the state of Michigan. It changed. In this area, we had 17 black elected officials, whether state reps, state senators, in this area, in our house, in our legislature. And when they redistricted the area, it turned into 5. You see what I'm saying? So they, that type of manipulation, how do you overcome that? You overcome that by voting. You overcome that by, what does it take? I told you I worked for the Democratic Party, right? As a volunteer. When I was in college, I graduated and I came back and I was working. And I used to work. I was the guy who would go around and make sure that on election day, one of the things, the election day is a big day, obviously, besides the canvassing. I would be the guy drive around who would make sure that the poll people had food. And then if some of them had to go home and take the kids out, I'd stay there until, for the hour they needed to do that throughout the day. But I had an opportunity. Like I remember one time I was at the polls and I had to be at this poll a couple of times because it was a very active poll. And I saw guys, and it wasn't as restrictive now. You can go in there and vote. You didn't have to do all this stuff like your ID and all these other things, or pay a poll tax. Wait until, but beyond that, I would see them walking to the store. And I told the dude, I said, come on in and vote. There's no line. It's the middle of the day, man. Come on, man. I'll be back, man. I live around the corner. I'm going to make sure I do it before you said 8 o'clock. I'm going to do it. Man, I came back. It was maybe 6 o'clock. And I saw the same dude. I said, you didn't vote, did you? He says, nah, but I'm going to come back and vote. Never voted. I mean, it takes 20, 30 minutes to do it. You know what I'm saying? So how are we going to expect control of our areas if we're not going to vote to take control? And it's just that simple. And a lot of people say, oh, it don't matter. Okay, well, these people over here playing chess and y'all playing checkers.
Yes.
So, so yeah, those are the two things that, as far as the justice system, the jury system, and voting, that absolutely will have, and especially voting in local elections has a more immediate effect on that locale than on in a grander perspective. So, yeah.
So we're going to call this the 1 minute drill, right? You ready? Come on.
I'm ready.
Laughing at that, right? So you have 1 minute to respond to each one of these questions, and I have maybe 6 of them, right?
I'm quite loquacious, so
but you get 1 minute. All you got is 1 minute. I'm timing you.
1 minute.
Right. So listen. So this is business success, career orientated. You get 1 minute drill. You get 1 minute, right? What separates successful people from unsuccessful people?
Determination, unwillingness to give up, the lack of fear. Because what I teach people is if you have fear, you'll never be successful. There's no one who's ever been successful who hasn't failed or who hasn't fallen. Failure is falling and not getting up. So most people lack of fear of falling or failing and continuing to do that. That's the key, because you're going to fail if you're going to be successful. It's absolute. Jordan said, I missed most of the shots that I took, yet I'm still considered the greatest player to ever play the game. Gotcha.
Time up, right? Okay. Next question is, what lessons from practicing law can be applied to everyday life?
I mean, life experiences. The things that you learn from. I learned so much from my clients. I learned so much from, whether they're despair, their bad decisions, the things that I can take from what they do to offer to someone else. Not only someone else, to myself. The pride that it has, they can go anywhere. They don't have to come see my black ass. I ain't nothing special. But knowing that they chose me allows me to choose them. And that's something that I take and apply that in other aspects of my life. And I try to make sure that it mirrors other people in other different areas of professional experiences.
Gotcha. Next question is, what is the biggest risk you've ever taken in your professional career?
I don't know. I don't see risk. I look at what I want to accomplish, and I don't have the fear. So I don't see it as a risk. I see it as a task, as a challenge. I guess people could say not coming out here and graduating from law school, not having any money, and going into private practice without anything. But I come from parents who made something from nothing.
Gotcha. Trial. This is you're in the courtroom. What is your preference? Trial by jury or trial
Jury.
by
Jury. No
jury?
judge. I
Wow.
mean, don't get me wrong. If I know the judge and I know the
Uh-huh.
judge has a record of fairness, and sometimes look at this. Here's a situation. I'll give you an example, and I'll stay under a minute. Let's say, for instance, the guy did it. He's on camera shooting the guy, and it's more of a legal issue than one of whether he did it or not. And it's one of a degree. Is it first degree or second degree? That judge has the potential, if they're a fair judge, can apply the law and remove the emotion that a jury can't. So sometimes you might take a jury trial where he's facing going to prison, but you want him to go with second versus first degree. And that sometimes you might choose a judge. But it's based on the circumstances.
Gotcha. One law you change tomorrow if you could.
Absolutely, I changed the federal law that you can't get expungements. That's ridiculous. I mean, states offer it, and so many people, and I think we're in an era where you see a bipartisan decision to change the draconian nature of criminal penalties. And I think that's ridiculous that the federal system doesn't have an expungement for people who have lived clean lives and bump their head and leave clean lives. Let them get free.
Got you. What is one piece of advice that every young black man needs to hear today?
Don't start a family too soon. Don't start a family until you're ready to make a commitment with that person, that kid, and that kid's mother, of course. But that child didn't ask to be here. And as men, another thing it'll create accountability and responsibility in their own lives by showing how responsible and committed they are going to be to that kid. And that kid, you make sure that kid doesn't fail. And when he falls, you're there to pick him up. That's being a parent. So stop making these kids that you ain't ready to take care of.
Got you. So listen, the hottest subject now in Black America is all over the news today. The young brother from Texas, I think it was McKinney, Texas. I'm not sure. It was somewhere along the McKinney, Texas area. Carmelo Anthony. He was involved with a stabbing at a high school sporting event. I believe it was in April of 2024 is when the incident took place, where he stabbed. So it's turned into a racial issue because Carmelo, of course, is black, and one of the brothers that he stabbed was a white guy. He was what is not up for question is how the whole thing transpired. He was standing under a tent that belonged to the opposite school, and he was approached by two white kids, two white boys, right, who were bigger than him in size and stature, right, older than him, and they told him to get out or get away from or get from up under the tent. That whole thing led to one of the person, his name was Austin, if I'm not mistaken, being stabbed. What, if anything, what kind of insight can you give us as you sit back and had the opportunity to examine what happened there? Where do you think, not necessarily him, because we're not in his mind, but when it comes from a legal standpoint, one of the things that I was most shocked by is that he didn't take the stand in his own defense. And in a situation like that, I would have thought that you give him an opportunity, since he's fighting for his life, to fight for his life. What is your observation as now? I know you don't like the Monday morning quarterback other legal professionals, but just cursory.
Let's go with it. So what I've been able to, I've watched it a little bit, and I've over the past couple of days, because we knew the verdict was going to be coming. The trial started, and we knew we were going to have a verdict soon, and it came out today. And what I didn't hear was typically the racial overtones between the kids. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear that, and maybe I need to look at the court records and listen to the testimony more, which could be an element of provocation, right? But what I understood was the two young men, they pushed the kid, and they were, not beat him, mercilessly. But let's take the perspective of where we're at. We're at a sporting event. This is a competitive nature thing. And, you could look at it from the most innocuous or innocent perspective of those kids, the two white kids versus this black kid, and they're like, get off our turf, in a more of a competitive way. I could look at it that way. Now, we think, I have my perceptions of Texas anyway, but nonetheless, this
me too.
This kid, yeah, exactly. I'm sure we probably don't differ in a lot of ways, but so this kid pushes him, and then I think he went to push him again, and the kid stabs him, and I think in the chest.
Yes.
And so
one time.
Right, yeah. One time. And so so the theory in this case is one of self-defense, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do self-defense, how are you going to explain that if the kid does not testify? There's a couple of different things that come from testifying. One, he can tell because one of the jury instructions, and I've done self-defense not only in this state, but in other states and trials. The thing is that it has to be reasonable of what that person was experiencing in that moment. So who best to express what was going on in that moment other than that kid himself? So I just cannot understand how you're going to promote or push a self-defense theory and not place the person who's declaring self-defense on the stand. That's number one. But number two, he's a kid. He's a nice looking kid. He's a kid. I don't know how he speaks, and I haven't heard him in any particular public space speaking. He's a kid that has the ability of being a kid, and you pick the right jury, that jury could have some empathy for him. They could have some understanding of why he may have done a stupid, foolish mistake that could cause them to go, because he got found guilty of the highest. He was guilty essentially as charged, yes, not as a lesser included manslaughter or something like that. But yes, that's what happens in a lot of these cases, in these first degree cases, that when you have the ability to have, my partner had a case a couple of weeks ago. He had the guy testify, and it was a murder one case, and he was convicted of murder two. There's no question the guy shot him 7 or 8 times. But having testified, having given his perspective, the prosecutor was unable to convict him as charged. So that's what you wanted here. So I don't know how you can do that without having that individual out there. And see, my understanding is the kid's on bond, meaning that he's able to go to his lawyer's office. It's not in the confines of the county jail, and he's able to, prepare and prepare with, it requires preparation to testify. It requires preparation. And that kid, but here's another thing, what we don't know. Had that kid made some other statements that if he took the stand, the prosecution could cross-examine him on those statements? I don't know. So some things we don't know in cases that are pretrial discovery and are kept out by the court, that we never know those things. So that's something that we may not know, but I can't imagine how you're going to promote a self-defense theory effectively without hearing from the person who we need to know, was it reasonable based upon the circumstances that they were experiencing in that moment.
Okay, I got you. I have to ask you about the All-Star JR situation. Here's a young man. He's a rapper. He's a human being. I don't even want to label him. He's a human being. He's in the state of Texas.
Yeah. He's a Detroit guy.
He's a Detroit guy. He's in a restaurant called Confessions. He's with a young lady, just him and a young lady. They're enjoying a dinner. As they were leaving, the restaurant was closing. It was 11:30. It was Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. As he was leaving, he was confronted by a group of 5, 6, 7, 10 people, men and women, right? But I don't even want to distinguish the men versus women, because nowadays women be on the same type of shit men be on. But he was confronted by a group of people, right? And what we see on videotape, on camera, we see that him being assaulted and then being robbed of his jury by the same people who are assaulting him. And so, and then here's the thing. He's a felon, right? He has prior felony convictions. So during the process, and this is important to me because you are a legal genius on state and federal level. So listen. So in his federal criminal complaint, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was charged. So 3 people got shot. 2 of the people who were robbing and assaulting him got shot, right?
Right.
There's in the federal criminal complaint, it says that while being assaulted and robbed, it even articulates how the assault was taking place. It even articulates the fact that one of the people who were shot had took a watch off his arm while beating him and put it in their pocket. He came into possession of a firearm. The video surveillance, none of that shows where the gun came from, right? So there is a person on the video pointing, one of the people who were with it, one of the attackers, pointing and saying, get the gun, get the gun. So the whole thing is he picked up the gun and he used it to shoot the people who were attacking him. 3 people dropped it. Yeah, 3 people got shot. So here's the thing, Mr. Perkins, and we have to, and your time is valuable. So now we have people saying, well, there is precedence on local and on federal level where a felon who is ordinarily barred from possessing and using a firearm,
right,
can possess a firearm if his life is in imminent danger.
Right.
So I don't know if that's a law or if that's a precedence that has been set when these type of cases have been put to the test, right?
Right.
So let me just go to the end of it. So
we're going to go back to that self-defense thing though in a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it is clear that he was being assaulted. It is absolutely clear. It's video evidence that he was being robbed and assaulted by multiple people. They had chairs picked up in the air for the crash down over his head, the whole 9 yards. He came in. There's no evidence saying that he came in with the firearm. And what we're saying is that he said, I don't know where the gun came from. I heard somebody saying, grab that gun, grab the gun. Out my peripheral vision, I seen the gun, I picked it up and I used it. So this is what they're saying. And this is why you're the perfect person for this conversation. So people are saying that although he may have had the right initially to possess and use a firearm because it's clear that he was being assaulted and robbed, he may have negated his right because he went too far because he continued to shoot after the threat appeared to be over. So my question to you is, okay, if you go too far, does that negate does that mean that you are in violation in total, or is that a different argument? Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't know you were going to finish. If you finish, I'm ready. I'm ready. Okay, so this is one of a classic question of fact. So in order to write a complaint in federal court, all an officer has to do is swear out the allegations and swear it out, and the magistrate or the judge will sign it. They bring them into duty court and they get arraigned on those particular charges. I don't know what the charge. I know it's felon in possession. Is he charged with the assault as well?
Not on the federal level, and that's another thing I want to ask you about.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing, though. Remember what they say in self-defense, the jury instructions, and they say it in different variations throughout the country. When you use self-defense, that if the theory of self-defense applies, the person is not guilty of anything.
Right.
So, but you're talking about, did he go too far? That's going to be a question of fact that the jury is going to have to answer. Clearly, the federal government's saying that he went too far, right? They're saying he went too far, and that's the reason why we're charging him with felon in possession. I still don't like the theory. It still doesn't make sense. As soon as the threat in his mind was over, he dropped the gun, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And he dropped the gun. So, and removed himself from the situation. So he didn't create these set of circumstances. He didn't, these individuals clearly had firearms or had potential dangerous weapons that could cause more than just minor injury. That's what self-defense also says. It's not a situation in which a person would expect minor injury. It's serious injury, death, or sexual assault. That doesn't apply here. But in this situation, it's serious injury or death. And either one of those things could have taken place. That's the reason why they say if you know, even though I don't agree with the statute about felony murder, if you commit a crime that like a bank robbery and someone dies, you're going to get charged with felony murder.
Yes.
You know, so all of those things could exist because when you get into an armed robbery, an assault and an armed robbery, you actually committed the assault and you also committed the armed robbery in people's presence. So what's going to be important in this case is you got to get the attorney who's representing him has got to get to those witnesses as soon as possible before they get sullied by the government. Because, you know, the government, those witnesses who got shot, they're going to say whatever they want. You know, they're going to sound like in the Ice Cube thing, talking about when they said, were they gangbangers? He like, had to be. You know, that's what they're going They're going to say anything they can to remove themselves from the crosshairs of prosecution because they should be going to prison, shot or not.
Yeah, shot. You know and that's the thing. That's one. So I have been representing All Star JR on all things YouTube, right? And one of the things I said when I spoke to academics and Poetic Flacco, and I said was this: hey, listen. So in the criminal complaint, it says that they charged him with being a felon in possession of a firearm.
Right.
They had the opportunity to examine the case in its totality. So
they said what now?
They had the opportunity to examine the case in its totality.
Exactly.
The feds only charged him with a felon in possession of a firearm. They didn't charge him with any act of violence. They didn't charge him with any aggravated offense. The 3 people got shot. 2 people who were actually robbing and assaulting him, and 1 innocent bystander got hit in the ass. Right? So the feds didn't pick that up. The state of Texas charged him a month later with 1 count of aggravated assault with a firearm, when it was 3 people who were shot.
Let me break that down. And this is my assessment as uninformed as I may be, just based upon the information that you're providing. What we can assume here is that the government independently made a determination that those other 2 people were shot, either deserved or this individual, the elements of a self-defense claim are evident there. But it sounds to me what they're going after is it's almost like they're working in conjunction with the feds in the sense that they're going after the one, I don't call him a victim. That's something the government got to prove. He's a complaining witness right now.
Yes,
he's a witness complaining of some type of injury of some kind of crime. He ain't no victim. Until a jury convicts, then you can call him a victim. So let's not do that. So what's going to happen is that individual has, they're going to say that he went too far in his thwarting the attack, and the guy was on the ground and he shot him, right?
Right.
And so they're saying he went too far. How can you say that when this individual was just attacked by 3 individuals? He doesn't know what's going on. It happens within seconds, this is all less than a minute, 2 minutes. And you're going to make a determination that's going to affect this individual's life for the rest of his life. Because even if he served a year or even if he served 2 years, the rest of his life is affected by it, period. And you're going to make that determination that he went too far. So what they want to do is they want a Monday morning quarterback on behalf of some scoundrels who were robbing him.
Yes.
I mean, so, hey, give me that case, and let's go and let's get it in. You know what I'm saying? Let's get it in.
Yes. I had to give you some clapping on that because my whole thing is because they listen. I knew something was amiss. When the criminal complaint came down the pipe, it didn't list the people who were robbing him. It didn't list them by name.
It's a setup. It's a setup. Now, let me ask you this. Did they give him a bond on the federal complaint?
No.
So that's all. So they just working the case. They've been working those witnesses. And so they did that on the state side. They working in collaboration, man. I'm telling you what it is. But see, when you get an opportunity, this is where you need a jury. Juries, if you get the right jury and I'm talking about black and white folks, because they, I do believe there's a different juror in a black experience than a white experience. I do. But you take what you got, and you try to get the best of what you got, and you reach into the humanity of an individual and the intellect of an individual, and you tell them, don't let this government fool you. Don't let them play you as a fool. Because for you to believe all of these things happen, because see, what I would do is I'm going to try both cases within each case.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as much as they don't want to talk about in the federal complaint, they don't want to talk about this individual, the individuals that were hurt. They're just saying he's a felon in possession. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring that in. You know what I'm saying? But then, and as much as they're gonna talk about it in the state case, I'm going to bring it in that they locked this guy up. Mm-hmm. They locked him up. And see, in the state of Texas, if he's charged in a state case, he's going to get a bond. He got a bond on that, even if it's high. The boy got money. You know what I'm saying? He could get out. But on the federal side, this. It ain't about money. It's about whether they say you can go home.
That's what it's about.
That's it.
That's what it's about. Mr. Perkins, one more question. And this is part one of a series that I want to do with you. And we had to do what we call evergreen content. We had to get the totality of who you are and why you became and who you are right now. So we call that evergreen content. My last question to you is, from a legacy perspective, what do you want people to remember about Todd Perkins 50 years from now?
I want people to know that I was God-fearing, that I'm a father of 2 kids and a supporter of many others, of Black talent, a Black man that wants to see the prominence and take us back into the historical, kings and queens, and we wore royal garments, that type of belief and that pride in ourselves, and to live harmoniously with everybody. And to the extent that we can't live harmoniously, I'm the person that believes absolute power only respects absolute power. And when we got our own power, we can walk where we want to walk and do what we want to do, but we got to be right in what we do to each other and to others. So, that's what I want. I want us to be better, pure and simple.
Hey, listen, the pureness of your response is this. And I asked you, what do you want people, how do you want to be remembered 50 years from now? You didn't, the heart of your response was what you wanted to do for other people. And that speaks volumes for the character, the content of your character. I want to applaud you and I want to say thank you, because I have a unique experience. I'm not just interviewing somebody who's a lawyer. I'm interviewing a person who I got to send you a retainer because I'm ignorant. I might be any goddamn. I'm ignorant.
Hey, I got to tell your audience. I had the pleasure of coming out and seeing you perform. And, I'm sitting there trying to sit in, you give me the best seats, but I don't want to sit up front. You know what I'm saying? And you started telling them people how expensive Todd Perkins was. I just had to put my head down, man.
Right. Listen, good legal representation, like a good steak. I went to Mexico and paid $1,800 for a steak with gold leaving on it. You hear me? Listen, if you want proper representation, don't come cheap. You ain't just you ain't just buying. It's the mind, and it is the status, and it is the know-how, and it's the affiliations. Mr. the Honorable. We're gonna try to get somebody. There has to be some type of judgeship. Got to be some type of judgeship coming available. Because
here's another thing though. Being a judge, you can only affect a certain space. But being in the community, you can touch us all. What I'm saying? It's just, because you're limited in what you can do. And that's, I'm here to support and to bring, there's judges, Monica Sanford, who's going to be the first Black woman judge in Farmington Hills, if I have anything to do about it, to continue to do and push those people who want to serve in the community. That's what I want to be. I want to be the energy behind it. I want to be a king and queen maker, not the king or queen.
Got you. Attorney at law, Esquire, the Honorable Mr. Todd Perkins. Thank you, brother.
Man, thank you for having me, man. I had a blast, bro.
Yeah, so listen, I'm going to tap you right now. Can I get it part 2?
Absolutely.
Okay, I got you, brother. I got you. Thank you, man.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a different environment. I'm down in my office downtown. but I had to get someplace like, you know how sometimes you're in some exotic place sometimes when you're doing your thing. So, you know, next time I want to do it when I'm on the East Coast.
Okay, I got you, brother. Thank you. I appreciate your time. It's been an honor.
Same here.
Thank you.